In the last video, we saw if-else-if structure. In this particular video, we will see nested if, or simply called if inside the body of another if. So let's take an example to understand what nested if condition is. Simply, we can understand if condition inside another if condition. That's all. Rest of the story is same. The way if works, it works even if it is inside the body of another if, or anywhere actually. So let's say we have input a number and then we check if x is larger than 10, then you move inside the if condition, if that is true. If that is false, then you are here, whatever you write here, it will work from here. But let's say x is greater than 10, then you print your number is greater than 10, your number is above 10, let's say you print that. Now after this statement, you move to this statement and you just make another check. If x is larger than 20. Now you see this if condition, this particular statement is inside this particular if condition. If this condition becomes true, only then you dive in. Otherwise you're not. So here you are checking if x is larger than 10, then you move inside, and inside you are making more checks. So for example, if x is larger than 10, then you print or do some stuff here, and then you apply further more checks, more granularity, more whatever your logic is. So let's say here you are checking if x is larger than 20. Now if this condition is true, then you move here, else. Now this else is of this if. If x is not larger than 20, then you move to this else part, and you're here. So, and we can have another if inside this particular if, or an if inside this else part, and so on. So if inside an if is called nested if, and we can have deep structures. For example, if, then something, then if, then something, then if. So maybe we can have a very lengthy structure, if nested if structure, depending upon the logic. So let's get ourselves comfortable as always by writing the code on Jupyter Notebook, because that makes much more sense when we see things running on the notebook. So let's say a is let's say again int, and let's say we take some number, and if a is larger than 10, then we say okay, print larger than 10, and do more stuff, print, let's say inside the top if condition. Okay, then maybe we have another check. If a is larger than 20, then say print greater than 20. Greater than 20, and you can print now, print inside the nested if. Okay, else print smaller or equal to 20, and then print, for example, inside the else part of nested if. That's it. And you can print here, print outside all ifs. Fine. So that's it. That's the structure. So let's see, let's give an input which is larger than, by the way, if input is not larger than 10, this if condition is false, then you directly dive to this print statement, and all this structure is not going to be executed. This complete thing is called the body of this if condition, and the body will only execute if the condition becomes true, whether that condition is just a single condition or you have a combination of a lot of comparisons and a lot of booleans, whatever. If this condition becomes true, whatever that condition takes form of, then and only then you dive into this part. And when you are in this part, then that's a whole new universe. Then you're on its own in the new part. In the new part, for example, if this condition becomes true, then you are in this part. That's the body of this particular if condition, and that's the body of the else part. See, the body of the top if condition has this kind of alignment. All the statements that are in the body of if condition, they start in the same alignment, and all the conditions, all the statements that are in the body of this particular if condition, they have their own alignment. And this indentation is necessary just to define, for example, which statement is in what kind of block. For example, if I just press a tab, then another tab, then this print statement is in this else part. And this is the indentation that is defining the placement of this print. If, for example, I press, I align this with this, this particular structure here, then this print statement is inside this if condition. This is the indentation that is defining the placement of different statements. And if the print starts from here, then it is completely outside of all if conditions. It is like this way. So let's run this code and see what happens. Let's say we print, let's say we just write a equals, let's say 12. So what do you think? What should be printed? If a is 12, then first of all, this condition is true. So greater than 10 will be printed inside the top if, that will be printed. Then this check will be executed and this condition will become false because 12 is not larger than 20. Then you will go to the else part, and less or equal to 20, this number, this string will be printed, and then inside the else part of nested if, that will be printed. And then you will be out of all if condition, then outside of all ifs, that will be printed. So let's see whether whatever we have said is correct or not. So yes, greater than 10 inside the top if, less or equal to 20 inside the else part of the nested if, outside all ifs. Yeah, so that's what the nested if is. And by the way, you can have for example more if conditions inside the nested ifs. For example, you can have one more condition here. If a is larger than 30, for example, then do what? Then print it is larger than 30 as well, and further print, maybe not necessarily that you always write print statements. You can do any interesting stuff inside inside the nested if of nested if. Fine. And then you can write the else part of this particular if condition here if you want to, or whatever. I mean, you can have as hilarious structure as you want, but that completely depends upon the logic. Or you may have an if condition inside that else part here. For example, you can write an if condition here if whatever. That is also perfectly fine. So if a is larger than 20, then you print this. If a is larger than 30, then this, for example. And let me write the else part here. Else print less or equal to 30, and we can print inside the nested, inside the else part of nested if of nested if. Okay, so wow, you see that program? Let me just scale it down so that you can see that completely. See that program? I mean, yeah, it makes perfectly sense to me. For example, you take an input. If that is larger than 10, then you're here. If it is larger than 20, then you are here. If it is not larger than 20, then you're here. Okay, so let's say it is larger than 20. If it is larger than 20, then you're here. Further, if it is larger than 30, then you're here. Otherwise, you're here. And once And by the way, if a is not larger than 10, then you are directly here. Wow. So let's run this code. Let me just scale it down so that you can see it more. You can see more text, let's say. So let's run this. No errors, great. So let's say the number is, let's say 25. So what do you expect the result? So the number is 25 is greater than 10 inside the top if, it is greater than 20 inside the nested if, it is smaller than or equal to 30, so inside the else part of nested if, and then outside all the if conditions. Great. Yeah. You enjoyed that? I enjoyed that. Great. Okay, so that's about the nested if. One more thing that I have already told you, but just let me tell you the power of indentation. You are here, for example, in this particular if condition. That's the if condition, and that's the nested if, and that's the else part of this if. If you move this else part in the indentation or the alignment with this if, then this is else part of this if, and this is not the else part of this if. So remember the power of indentation. This is the indentation that defines which part belongs to what kind of block or structure in Python. In other languages, sometimes, for example, in C++, they normally use to write these curly brackets to define a block, and their indentation doesn't really matter. But in Python, this is the indentation that actually defines each and everything. So, for example, this is a crucial example. If this else just moves backwards and aligned with this if, you get this else with this if. These are two if and else structures. This is still nested if without an else part. And if this else move somewhere in between, I mean, if this is not aligned with this if, this is not aligned with this if, you get a syntax error because that is not a proper indentation. So focus on indentation. That is really, really important. Yeah. So although I've told you that the indentation has already told you, but I just found to make a slide over this else part because that's important. Sometimes you may get confused whether this else belongs to this if or that if. Well, the indentation defines this else belong to what. Okay, I end this control flow indentation here. So from next video, we are jumping toward loops. But before loops, I just want to write a lengthy program in if, else if, their combinations. I just want to write a Jupyter program for you to get comfortable with if, nested if, the conditions that are ands and ors and nots or stuff like so. So in the next video, we will be practicing more on Jupyter for if conditions, and then from the next to next video, we will be jumping toward loops, the very, very powerful structure. Okay, hope to see you in the next video.